Hey y'all, today let's dive into an abbreviated history of Felix the Cat. Why abbreviated? Well, the story spans over a century and intertwines with many significant historical events, so buckle up. Our tale begins with two key figures, Patrick O'Sullivan, born in 1885, and Otto Mesmer, born in 1892. Both shared an interest in cartoons, but Sullivan had a more business-focused mind. They crossed paths in 1915, and Sullivan hired Mesmer for his new animation studio, an art form so new that they were among the pioneers. The studio's journey was a bit tumultuous, with Sullivan facing legal troubles and Mesmer being drafted into World War I, but despite this, Mesmer honed his skills and Sullivan secured the work, and took all of the credit. Listen, I won't delve into Sullivan's crimes, but they were serious. Most sources suggest that he wasn't a good dude, and I tend to agree based on what I've read, but obviously, I never met the guy. Mesmer was the opposite. Kind and soft-spoken, he often didn't even want credit for his work, allowing Sullivan to swoop right in. Over time, Sullivan Studios gained attention, attracting clients like the Paramount Screen magazine, which was a weekly compilation shown before feature films. Sullivan, not too keen on it, told Mesmer to handle it on the side. Mesmer, working nights and weekends at his home, crafted Feline Follies, marking Felix the Cat's first appearance. Felix, initially Master Tom, drew from Mesmer's early work. His aesthetic mirrored Sambo, a racially charged character from Sullivan's past, and his mannerisms echoed that of Charlie Chaplin, who had been animated by Mesmer in his cartoon adaptations. I don't want to gloss over the offensive depictions in these old cartoons, as it was unfortunately commonplace at the time, even in the comic books that I collect. I am not one to speak on this issue, but I would like to listen, and I ask you all to keep your ears open to those directly affected. I know this is a bit of a heavy tangent, but it is important. Be good to people. The success of Feline Follies led to more films, and by the third, Master Tom officially became Felix. I do also want to note that Felix was not the first film cat. From 1913 to 1944, there was a comic strip called Crazy Cat by George Harriman. And from 1915 to 1918, it too was produced in cartoon form. However, it had few similarities to the comics and therefore did not find much success. Despite Felix's popularity, the Paramount Screen magazine's high cost led to its cancellation. Sullivan acquired Felix's copyright and began shopping for distribution. Margaret Winkler, a Warner Brothers employee, took on Felix and became the first female producer and distributor of animated films. Within a month, at the age of 27, she had sold Felix to over 60% of the country. Ruthless with promotional material, she also propelled Felix into widespread merchandising success. Mesmer and fellow artist Hal Walker couldn't keep up with the demand. Sullivan conceded and allowed Mesmer to bring in guest animators. And in 1922, 28-year-old Bill Nolan, the father of Rubber Hose Animation, joined. Nolan, with Mesmer's blessing, simplified Felix's design. Felix's comic adventures began in 1923 when King Features Syndicate signed on for a weekly Sunday strip drawn by Mesmer. Be sure to stick with me for future videos so I can expand on this topic of comics further. Okay, shameless self-promotion over. Winkler, alongside her now husband Charles B. Mintz, often butted heads with Sullivan over ownership and credit issues when it came to Felix. Meanwhile, Mesmer was just working away in the studio making everybody money and not complaining at all, but I guess he's just built different. This feuding lasted for many years before Sullivan and Winkler parted ways. Kind of a cool note, Winkler Productions also distributed films by this real indie artist, a 23-year-old dude named, Walt Disney? Did I pronounce that right? Anyways, with Walt being so new, Mintz was able to strong-arm his productions into just blatantly ripping off Felix's design. Example 1, Julius the Cat, featured in the Alice in Wonderland films. Don't really need to say any more about this. Example 2, which happened post the Sullivan-Winkler split, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Real shockingly, Winkler Productions also ended up butting heads with Disney, which resulted in them taking away Oswald and most of Walt's cartoonists. I wouldn't be too worried about that Disney guy, though. Because of this, he was forced to create a new character, and I'm pretty sure he did alright after that. And in 2006, Disney actually got Oswald back from NBC Universal after the poor dude had been tossed around and forgotten for years. Post-Winkler, Felix's distribution switched to Ideal Productions, which was just an amalgamation of Sullivan and his attorney. Everything ran smoothly until 1928, when Disney dropped Steamboat Willie, forever changing the animation industry with its use of sound. Sullivan initially resisted sound, but ultimately caved and gave it a shot with Felix. Unfortunately, the work was really sloppy and rarely matched the visuals on screen. The studio fell on hard times, and most employees were let go. including longtime artist Hal Walker, who had been with the company since 1920. Fortunately, Hal was able to land on his feet at Fleischer Studios working on Popeye. By 1932, Sullivan's health rapidly failed, and he passed in 1933. The studio closed. The film rights to Felix were given to another director, however, he proved unsuccessful in producing new films. Mesmer continued drawing the Felix newspaper strips. The Sunday strips ran until 1943, and the daily strips until 1967. He also wrote and drew monthly Felix comic books for Dell Publishing. On top of all of this, after the closure of Sullivan Studios, Mesmer worked as an artist for the sign king Douglas Lee, who was the pioneer in outdoor advertising, most famous for making New York City's Times Square the site of some of the world's greatest electric billboards. Balancing this work became a challenge for Mesmer, who brought in fellow artist and friend Joe Oriolo to share the workload on Felix. Although late to the party, the significance of Oriolo in this story cannot be overstated, second only to Mesmer himself. Oriolo launched the award-winning Felix the Cat television series in 1960. By 1971, he had become president of Felix the Cat Productions Incorporated, and right up until his death in 1985, he spent the bulk of his time overseeing the merchandising of Felix, which had become profitable again for the first time since the 1920s. Throughout everything, Joe was very vocal about giving Mesmer the credit he deserved. And because of this, when Mesmer passed in 1983 at the age of 91, he did not do so in obscurity. His obituary properly states him as the creator of Felix the Cat. After Joe's death, his son Don Oriolo took over. The merchandising continued successfully, and there were even attempts to relaunch Felix back onto the screen, unfortunately to limited success. In 2012, the rights to Felix were acquired by DreamWorks Animation, which planned to make him one of the most desired fashion brands in the world. A bit of a weird move, but I guess if you consider Felix's merchandising history, it could make sense. Most recently, after almost 2 decades of relative silence, Rocket Ship Entertainment released a brand new comic adventure starring Felix and his friends. Only time will tell what the future holds for Felix. This is where you might expect me to come up with some dramatic conclusion, tie everything together all pretty, put a bow on it, but honestly, the story and the people involved speak for themselves. I do highly recommend Felix, The Twisted Tale of the World's Most Famous Cat by John Canemaker. It's a great read and where I got a lot of this information. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this abbreviated history and have a wonderful day out there.